Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something today you experience all the time, every single day, really. Your emotions.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, emotions. I've been digging into some really cool lectures on neuroscience and the self, and
Oh, cool.
it's pretty mind-blowing stuff. We tend to think of emotions as, these kind of abstract, fluffy things,
Yeah.
but it turns out they're totally rooted in our physical bodies.
Hmm.
Like, get this, your brain can even simulate emotions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like creating physical responses even when there's no real danger.
This is like a false alarm, almost.
Kind of. It's like your brain has this built-in virtual reality system, but for feelings.
That's wild. So it's like our brains and bodies are like in constant communication then.
Yeah, exactly. It's called the body-brain loop.
Okay.
And your brain is always getting these signals from your body, things like your heart rate, even gut feelings, to kind of figure out what's going on inside.
Interesting. So it's like a constant feedback loop.
Totally. Like
Yeah.
my brain's getting live updates from my body all the time.
Hmm. Makes sense. So then what happens with those signals? Like what does the brain do with that information?
Well, let's say you stub your toe,
Ouch.
right? So pain signals, they zoom up to your brain.
Okay.
And then that triggers a chain reaction.
Hmm.
Your heart might start racing, your muscles tense up,
Raise.
you make a face, the whole deal.
Yeah, yeah.
But all those physical changes,
Uh-huh.
they send signals right back to the brain.
Back to the brain.
Yep. And guess what? That actually intensifies the pain and shapes how you emotionally respond to it.
It's like a two-way street.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just my brain telling my body what to do, my body's talking back. And that's actually changing how I feel.
That is so cool. So it's not just physical sensations then?
Nope. This loop is happening with all kinds of emotions.
Really?
Yeah, whether you're feeling, I don't know, joy, sadness, even something like nostalgia.
Nostalgia. But that's like a mental thing, right? Thinking about the past.
It is. But remember, our brains and bodies are always chatting. And even the most complex emotions, they're built on these simpler, more basic feelings.
Interesting. Where do those basic feelings come from?
They come from a really old part of your brain called the brainstem.
The brain state.
Yeah, and these feelings are called primordial feelings. And they're kind of like the primary colors of emotion.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Primary colors.
Right. So, like red, yellow, blue, you mix those to make every other color.
Right.
Well, primordial feelings are like that. Your brain takes those and mixes them with your thoughts and memories and experiences to create every single human emotion.
So my brain is like an artist blending these basic feelings to make a whole masterpiece of emotions.
Exactly. But hold on, it gets even wilder.
Wilder. How?
Our brains can actually simulate these feelings without anything actually happening in our bodies. It's like a built-in emotion simulator.
What? So I can feel something even if it's not really happening.
Yep, it's called the as-if loop. I think about
Yeah.
when you watch a scary movie, right? Even though you're safe on your couch, your heart is pounding like you're in danger.
Right. Right.
It's because your brain is getting your body ready, just in case.
So my brain is like rehearsing for danger, even if it's just a movie.
Exactly. It's practicing those feelings so it's prepared if something similar happens in real life.
That's pretty smart. But this as-if loop, does it do anything else besides scare us in movies?
Actually, it's super important for something else too.
Oh, what's that?
Empathy.
Empathy.
Yeah, our ability to understand other people's emotions. By simulating those feelings ourselves, we get a sense of what someone else might be going through.
So if I see someone who's really angry, my brain might actually simulate that anger just a little to help me understand what they're feeling.
You got it. It's like our brains are constantly creating these mini emotional simulations to connect us with others.
Wow, that's incredible. We've got this whole system where our brains are making us feel all these things, even without anything actually happening. But where does all this lead? What's the big takeaway about emotions themselves?
The key takeaway,
Yeah.
emotions, they're not just these fleeting feelings. They're actually programs of action.
Programs of action.
Yeah, like they're designed to motivate us, help us survive, help us thrive.
So it's not just what I feel inside.
Yep.
It's about how my whole brain and body work together, how they respond to the world.
Exactly. It's a whole body experience.
But if these programs are in all of us, why do we react so differently sometimes? Why doesn't everyone react to, I don't know, like danger the same way?
That's where individual experiences come in.
Oh,
See, we all share the same basic emotional hardware, but our software is totally unique.
software.
Yeah, it's like our personality, our culture, our past experiences, all those things shape how we understand and express our emotions.
So two people could be feeling the same emotion, like anger, but one might yell while the other one withdraws.
Exactly. And it all depends on what they've learned about anger throughout their lives.
It's not just the emotion itself, then.
Right.
It's about how we make sense of it, how we give it meaning in our own lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's this one study that looked at two specific emotions, admiration and compassion.
Oh, admiration and compassion. Those are like more social emotions.
Yeah. And they wanted to see how the brain handles them.
Okay, what did they find?
Well, they had people listen to stories designed to trigger those feelings, admiration or compassion.
Okay.
And then they watched how their brains responded using this thing called an fMRI.
With MRI?
Yeah, it's like a brain scanner.
Okay.
And get this, even these really complex, nuanced social emotions,
Uh-huh.
they lit up the same areas in the brain as basic emotions like fear and happiness.
No way.
Yeah.
So even though we're talking about admiration and compassion, which are pretty sophisticated emotions,
Right.
our brains are still using the same basic wiring.
Exactly. It shows just how connected our emotions really are. Even the super complex ones are rooted in those same fundamental systems.
So cool. What else did they find out?
Well, they found that feeling these emotions, feeling admiration and compassion, it activated a part of the brain called the posterior medial cortex.
Posterior medial cortex.
Yeah, the PMC.
Hmm.
And this part of the brain is linked to self-awareness.
Self-awareness. So to feel those social emotions, you actually have to tap into your own sense of self.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Like, to really admire someone's achievement, you have to recognize the value of their qualities, right?
Right.
And to feel compassion, you got to connect with their suffering on a personal level.
That makes sense. It's like we're using our own internal experience to understand what other people are going through.
Exactly. We're drawing on our own experiences to relate to others. It's pretty amazing.
So cool. Anything else interesting about how the PMC was involved?
Yeah. They found that big areas of the PMC were active, depending on what kind of story people were listening to.
Oh.
So, like, the brain seemed to distinguish between, say, admiration for skills or compassion for physical pain compared to admiration for, like, virtuous acts or compassion for mental pain.
Wow. So, like, our brains are drawing a line between things that are happening to someone's body and things that are happening more in their mind.
That's what it looks like. Physical skills, physical pain, those are both tangible, you know.
Right. You can see them.
But things like virtue and mental pain, those are
Yeah.
more internal. And our brains are making those distinctions even within these social emotions.
Incredible. Our brains are making all these tiny distinctions all the time.
Right. And there's one more thing that really stood out in this research.
What's that?
They found that compassion for physical pain,
Hmm.
it was processed faster than compassion for mental pain.
Faster. So, like, the brain responded more quickly. Why would that be?
Well, the researchers, they think it might be because of evolution, you know? Like compassion for physical pain.
Yeah.
It might be a more primal instinctive response, something that's crucial for survival.
Right. Like, imagine you see someone who's been injured. You need to react quickly.
Exactly. But understanding and responding to emotional suffering,
Yeah.
that could require more complex processes, things like empathy and perspective taking. Maybe those things evolved a little later.
So it's almost like our brains are still catching up when it comes to understanding emotional pain.
Maybe. But the main takeaway here is that even these complex social emotions, they're still deeply rooted in our biology, just like those more basic emotions.
Right. It's all connected. It's amazing how much we're learning about how emotions really work.
It really is. And, you know, this leads us to a really important question. How do we use all this knowledge about emotions to actually live better lives?
Right. How do we apply all of this? What does it mean for us day to day?
Well, I think the most empowering thing to remember is that our emotions, they're not these mysterious forces controlling us.
Right.
They actually have a basis in biology, in our brains and bodies.
So instead of feeling helpless, we can actually start to understand what's happening. We can start to see the mechanisms behind our emotions.
Exactly. And that understanding gives us tools to actually manage our emotions more effectively.
Tools.
Yeah, it's like we're being handed the user manual for our own emotions.
Oh, I like that. So if we've got this user manual, what are some of the things it tells us? Like, how do we actually regulate our emotions?
Well, step one is remembering that feelings, they start in the body. That gives us a really concrete place to start.
So paying attention to those physical sensations, those gut feelings we talked about.
Yes. Our emotions aren't just these abstract thoughts. They're connected to what's happening physically. So paying attention to those sensations,
Uh-huh.
it's like getting clues to help us figure out what we're feeling.
It's like our bodies are giving us feedback all the time.
Exactly. But there's a tricky part. Remember those as-if feelings?
The ones where our brain is simulating emotions.
Yep. Those can be tough
Mhm.
because they might not actually reflect our real emotional state.
Right. It can be hard to tell what's real and what's just our brain messing with us.
Totally. So how do we tell the difference? How do we figure out what we're really feeling?
Good question.
It takes some introspection, a little self-awareness. We have to ask ourselves a few questions. Like, what caused this feeling? Does it actually fit the situation? And do I tend to feel this way, even when things aren't really that bad?
So we need to kind of check in with ourselves.
Right. See if our emotions match up with what's really going on. And remember that tiny delay we talked about?
Yeah.
Between something happening and us actually feeling it?
Yeah.
Well, knowing that there's even a split second for our brain to process things, it really highlights how important patience and mindfulness can be.
Patience and mindfulness. Okay, I can see that. But how do those things actually help us manage our emotions?
Well, think about how often we just react to our emotions without thinking. We let them control us.
Oh, yeah. All the time. Like you just get swept up in the feeling, no time to process.
Exactly. But if we can just pause for a second, take a breath, give our brains a chance to catch up, we can actually choose a different way to respond, a more helpful way.
So it's not just reacting, it's responding.
Yes. It's about becoming aware of the feeling, understanding it, and then deciding how we want to act. And that's where mindfulness can be so helpful.
Right, because mindfulness teaches you to be present with your thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And to do it without judging yourself.
Ah, that's the hard part.
It is. But when you can do that, it creates space between the feeling and your reaction.
Okay. So you're not just on autopilot anymore.
Exactly. You can choose how you want to respond.
That makes a lot of sense. But what if mindfulness isn't your thing? What are some other tools people can use to help regulate their emotions?
There are so many. It's really about finding what works best for you. Some people find that cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is helpful. Yeah, it helps you identify and challenge thought patterns that are causing problems.
Oh, interesting.
Others find relief through exercise or spending time in nature or being creative. It's really like having a whole toolkit of techniques. And the more you learn about emotions, the more tools you can add.
I like that. So the more we understand, the more control we have.
Exactly. We can become active participants in our own emotional lives instead of feeling like we're just along for the ride.
It's empowering, isn't it?
It really is. I'm starting to see emotions in a whole new light. They're not just these vague feelings anymore. They're powerful, complex programs. And the more we understand those programs, the more we can understand ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been such a fascinating conversation. But I think it's time for us to take a break and let our listeners process all this incredible information.
I agree. We've covered so much ground already, but there's still so much more to explore. We'll be right back after a short break to dive even deeper into the fascinating world of emotions. Welcome back, everyone. So, before the break, we were talking about how our brains actually process different types of emotions. And, it turns out it's not as simple as you might think.
It's definitely more complicated than just happy or sad. We were talking about this study on admiration and compassion, right?
Yeah. And remember, they found that different areas of the PMC were active depending on the type of story people were listening to.
Right. Like the brain was making a distinction between admiring someone's skills versus admiring them for being a good person. Right?
Exactly. And it seemed to make similar distinctions with compassion, too, like compassion for physical pain versus compassion for, say, emotional pain.
So, like, our brains are drawing a line between stuff that's happening in the body and stuff that's happening more in the mind.
It seems that way. Like physical skills, physical pain, those are things you can see, right? But like virtue or mental pain, those are more internal. And our brains seem to be making those distinctions even within these complex social emotions.
That is so wild. So are you saying our brains are constantly making these tiny distinctions that shape our experience, but we're not even aware of it?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And there's one more thing from this study that I found really interesting.
Oh, what's that?
They found that compassion for physical pain, it was processed faster than compassion for mental pain.
Faster. So like the brain responded more quickly to physical pain? That's so interesting. Any idea why that might be?
Well, the researchers think it could be because of, well, evolution.
Evolution.
Yeah, like Compassion for physical pain might be a more basic instinct, something that was really crucial for survival.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like if you see someone who's injured, you need to help them immediately.
Exactly. But understanding and responding to emotional pain, that probably takes a bit more brain power. It involves things like empathy and perspective taking.
Mm.
And those might be skills that developed a little later in human history.
Right, because with emotional pain, you can't always see what's wrong, right? You have to really understand the person's situation, which is more complex.
Exactly. So it's almost like our brains are still catching up when it comes to understanding emotional suffering.
Wow, fascinating. So even though these social emotions like compassion and admiration feel really complex, they're still rooted in our biology, just
Yeah.
like those more basic emotions, right?
Exactly. And I think that's a really important takeaway from all of this.
It is. It shows that emotions, they're not just these random fluffy things.
Right.
They're a real part of us, connected to our brains, our bodies, our evolution.
Totally. And that brings us to a really crucial question. How can we use all this knowledge about emotions to, actually improve our lives?
Yeah, that's the big question. What does it all mean? How do we apply it?
Well, I think one of the most empowering things to remember is that our emotions aren't these mysterious forces that are completely controlling us.
Right.
They actually have a basis in biology, in how our brains and bodies work.
So it's not about feeling helpless.
No, not at all. If we can start to understand the mechanisms behind them, then we can actually start to gain some control.
I love that idea. So it's like we're being handed the user manual for our emotions.
Exactly. And if we're looking at that manual, step one is to remember that our feelings start in the body.
Oh, yeah, like those physical sensations, the gut feelings.
Yep. They're super important because they give us clues about what's going on emotionally.
But what about those as if feelings, the simulated ones?
Oh, those are tricky.
Yeah, because sometimes they can be misleading, right? Like they don't always match what we're actually feeling.
It can feel like our brains are playing tricks on us.
So how do we figure out what we're really feeling? How do we tell the difference between a real emotion and a simulated one?
That's where the introspection comes in.
Introspection.
Yeah. We have to ask ourselves some questions like, what caused this feeling? Does it make sense in this situation? And do I tend to feel this way even when things aren't really that bad?
So we need to take a step back, evaluate the situation, and see if our emotions really fit what's going on.
Exactly. And it helps to remember that there's a tiny delay between something happening and us actually experiencing the feeling.
Right, that split second.
Yep. So knowing that there's even that little bit of space for our brain to process information,
Yeah.
it just highlights how important patience and mindfulness can be.
Okay, so patience and mindfulness, but I still don't totally get how they help us manage our emotions in like real life situations.
Well, think about it. How many times do we react to our emotions without even thinking? We let them control our actions completely.
Oh, all the time. It's like you're just swept away by the wave of emotion, no time to process or anything, just react.
Exactly. But if we can create even a small pause, take a breath,
Hmm.
let our brains catch up, we can choose a different way to respond, a more skillful way to react.
So it's about responding, not just reacting. I like that.
It's about becoming aware of the feeling, understanding it, and then deciding how we want to act. And that's where mindfulness can be such a powerful tool.
Because mindfulness helps us to be present with our feelings without judging them, right?
Exactly. And that creates space between the feeling and your reaction, so you're not just on autopilot anymore.
That makes a lot of sense. But what if mindfulness isn't your thing? What are some other tools people can use to help regulate their emotions?
Well, there are lots of different approaches, and the best one really depends on the person. Some people find that cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is really helpful.
CBT.
Yeah, it helps you to identify and challenge those thought patterns that are causing problems, the ones that are making those difficult emotions even worse. Other people find relief through things like exercise, spending time in nature, or doing something creative. It's like we all have this toolkit of techniques, and the more we understand about emotions, the more tools we can add.
So it's not just about finding the one right tool, it's about building up a whole collection of them.
Exactly. And that helps us to become active participants in our own emotional lives instead of feeling like we're just along for the ride.
I love that. It's about taking control. And the more we understand about how our emotions work, the more control we have. Knowledge is power.
That's a great way to put it. I feel like this conversation has helped me to see emotions in a whole new light. They're not just these vague, mysterious forces anymore.
Right.
They are powerful programs running in the background, influencing how we experience the world. And the best part is, the more we understand them, the better we can understand ourselves.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been such an incredible discussion, but I think it's time for us to take another break and give everyone a chance to process all this amazing information.
Sounds good to me. We've covered a lot of ground, but we're not done yet. We'll be back in a few minutes to finish up this deep dive into the incredible world of emotions. Welcome back, everyone. I don't know about you, but I'm still buzzing from our conversation about emotions. It really is empowering to realize how much agency we have.
It really is. It's so easy to feel like we're just victims of our emotions sometimes, but that's not the whole story.
Not at all. And it's not about trying to, get rid of our emotions altogether.
Right.
We need to learn to work with them, to see them as part of what makes us human.
Exactly. It's like we get so caught up in managing them and controlling them that we forget to appreciate how complex and fascinating they really are.
It's like we're so busy trying to fix them that we forget to listen to what they're trying to tell us.
I love that. Our emotions can be incredible teachers if we just pay attention.
This whole conversation has been a real eye-opener for me.
Mhm.
I used to think of emotions as these mysterious forces that just kind of took over. But now I see them as valuable information, like messengers that are trying to tell me something important. And if I can learn to understand those messages, I can actually use them to help me grow.
It sounds like you're really starting to embody these ideas. I love it.
I'm trying. But before we wrap things up, there's one last question I have to ask.
Okay, what's that?
If we can learn to work with our emotions, through things like mindfulness and CBT and all that, does that mean we should always be striving for positive emotions
Yeah.
and trying to avoid the negative ones? Is the goal to just be happy all the time?
That's such a great question. I think a lot of people have this idea that emotional regulation is all about forcing yourself to be happy.
Right. Like slap a smile on and pretend everything's fine.
Exactly.
Mm.
But that's not what it's about at all. Remember, emotions give us valuable information. They're like messengers, even the ones we don't like.
So you're saying that even the unpleasant emotions, things like sadness, anger, fear, they can be helpful.
Absolutely. Think of them as signals. They might be alerting us to something that needs our attention. Or motivating us to take action. Sometimes they're even trying to protect us from harm.
So if we try to just ignore them or push them down, it could backfire.
It often does. Suppressing our emotions can actually create more tension and stress, and it can even have a negative impact on our physical health.
So we're not supposed to be chasing good feelings and avoiding bad ones. So how do we approach this whole emotional regulation thing in a healthy way? How do we find balance?
The key is to cultivate a mindful awareness of our emotions, to learn to notice them as they come up, allow ourselves to really feel them, and then choose how we want to respond.
So it's about finding a way to respond that aligns with our values and goals.
Exact.
But that includes all of our emotions, right? Even the ones that feel messy or uncomfortable.
Especially those. It's about approaching our whole inner experience with curiosity and compassion. It's about learning to be a friend to ourselves.
That reminds me of something we were talking about earlier, self-compassion. It's like the foundation for everything.
Yes, self-compassion is absolutely essential. It helps us to be more emotionally resilient, to bounce back from challenges, and to remember that we're not alone in our struggles.
It's so important. This whole conversation has just highlighted how interconnected everything is. Our brains, our bodies, our emotions, our experiences, our sense of self, and even our capacity for compassion. It's all woven together.
I love that. It's a beautiful tapestry. And the more we understand about how it all works, the more we realize just how much power we have to shape our own emotional experience.
It's both humbling and incredibly empowering. But I realize we're just about out of time for today's deep dive. Before we go, is there anything that really stood out to you in all this research on emotions? What's the most mind-blowing takeaway?
For me, the most mind-blowing thing is that our brains are literally constructing our emotions from scratch.
That's crazy.
It's true. They're using the physical sensations from our bodies as the building blocks.
Yeah.
It's like this incredible partnership between our physical experience and our mental experience that creates the whole world of emotions.
Wow. It's amazing, and maybe a little bit unsettling when you really start to think about it. But it also opens up so many possibilities. If we know that our emotions are just programs, then we can start to recognize those programs running in our own lives, right?
Exactly. And that leads to a really important question. What kind of programmer do you want to be?
Wow. What a powerful question. And I think that's the perfect place for us to leave things today. We've explored so much together, from the nuts and bolts of the body-brain loop to the incredible power of emotions and the very nature of the self. It's been quite a journey.
We've gone deep into the science of emotions, and we've even started to think about some practical things we can do to become more skillful at navigating our own emotional landscapes.
But as always, the exploration doesn't end here. I encourage all of our listeners to keep diving deeper into these mysteries. Keep exploring your own mind and body. And we'll see you back here next time for another deep dive.